Oh,
Oh wait, no, we can't. Never mind. Sorry, I'm special.
all right, there we go. Thank you, Jessica. Good evening. I'm Mayor Paul Rennemeyer. Thank you all for tuning in and signing on tonight. During this virtual meeting, we ask that you please be patient and courteous. Technology isn't infallible, and we are sure that there may be some kinks we need to work through. If you are joining us via the internet and every household member is using bandwidth for their devices, you may experience quality issues, so we apologize in advance. Additionally, if you are joining us on Zoom but do not intend to ask any questions tonight, you can watch the meeting on Windsor TV, cable channel 8 if you have Comcast, or on the town's YouTube page. Please know that everyone will be muted until we're ready for the public engagement portion of the meeting. When we get to questions and comments, please listen for your name and or phone number, and the moderator will call out who is allowed to speak at that time. That's when we will unmute participants one at a time. You may also notice the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. You can ask a question using this feature at any time during the meeting. Our moderator will address questions in the Q&A section as appropriate. Because we are using this digital format, submitting a question prior to the actual question and answer time will better ensure we receive and can address them. If you are having issues connecting via Zoom or have other questions about how to participate tonight, you can visit windsorgov.com/virtual meetings for more detailed instructions. At this time, I'm going to pause for a moment and let those who are logging on to the Zoom platform get situated. We want to give everyone a chance to make sure the volume on their computer or device is turned on.
I say a couple.
And we will pause again here for another minute just to make sure that everybody is tuned in, as it is 4:02. We might have a few people still joining us a couple minutes tardy.
Mayor, you are good to go.
Perfect. First item on tonight's discussion is regarding our recycling center. Tonight, this community conversation is focused on the closing of the recycling center. First, I want the community to know that the town board did not make this decision lightly to close the center. It is important to note that this cut was part of an overall cut to our operations budget. In total, the town board cut $8.3 million so far planned in 2020 operational costs. Additionally, the town board cut $11.5 million from our capital improvement budget, $20 million in total. To be transparent, the impacts of COVID-19 are causing enormous impacts to the town's budget, and we were forced to take swift action in order to try and react to our new financial reality. It is likely that the town will be dealing with these impacts for the years to come. With that being said, I would like to give the floor to Eric Lucas, our Public Services Director. He will be presenting information on the recycling center, including its history, expenses, revenue, and the rationale for closing the center. After his presentation, we will start to take questions. Mr. Lucas, I will throw it to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Give me a second and I will share my screen. Let me know when everybody can.
Mr. Lucas, really quick, let me add here that our public participation portion, if you haven't already, please begin typing in your questions into the Q&A feature through our Zoom meeting. Anyone who is waiting on the phone, when we begin taking questions, please listen for the moderator to call your name and or phone number, at which time you will be unmuted and allowed to speak. To allow participation from as many residents as possible, we will limit questions to 3 minutes apiece. With that, sorry, Mr. Lucas, you are free to begin.
You're good. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor and Board, for having us tonight. I wanted to remind you that Terry Walker, Public Works Director, is on the phone, as well as Corey Roush, our Facilities Manager. As you, Mayor, just alluded to, the town had to make some difficult decisions regarding a lot of items in our budget due to COVID, and one of which was the closure of the recycling center. So I wanted, the slideshow kind of takes us back a little bit before we come to current day, just kind of give everybody a little bit of a history of the recycling center over the last 3 or 4 years, and understand how we ultimately got to where we're at today with the closure. So with that said, just very briefly, if you look at 2017, and I want to point out as I go along, pay attention to the revenue and the expenses, because it does change significantly over the course of a few years. And then I'll get into an explanation a little more detailed as to why. But in 2017, recycling revenue generated about a little over $10,000. That's so we collect the recycling material, and then we were having it hauled off, and the hauler would actually pay us some revenue back for hauling it off, because then they would in turn sell it. Ultimately, net loss of about $25,000 in terms of operating expenditures versus revenue. As we moved into 2018, and this is where you begin to see the decline, and again, I'll explain why in a slide or two. Recycling revenue generated was about $2,200, but then you see the expense, the loss going up, a net loss of $55,000. A bulk of that was a $20,000 incident that we had where over a weekend, some folks dumped materials. Some of it was hazardous. That caused a large cleanup that cost us a lot of money. But even if you eliminated that, you can still see that the expense of recycling continued to go up. To be fully transparent, at that same time, we still had the brush recycling drop-off at Diamond Valley. That same year, the board agreed, because we were losing so much money in the cost of recycling brush and grinding it up was going up exponentially. We doubled the fees for commercial and residential that year for the recycling of brush, not recycling commodities like paper or plastic. So as you move into 2019, that year, that late 18 into early 19, we got out of the brush business. That went away. But as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we did hold 2 recycling days, one in the spring, one in the fall, to give residents the opportunity to recycle some things such as grills and that kind of stuff, as well as bring their yard waste. We did spend about $45,000 there. That's not reflected in the chart off on the right. I just wanted to be as transparent as possible to show that we're still trying to serve the community in some way in terms of brush, but not be in the full business like we used to be. So in 2019, you can see the revenue for recycling commodities dropped down to $512. Remember, just a few years back, it was $10,000. Contributed to an overall loss of $40,000. That may seem odd when you look at the chart on the right, but you got to remember, we also moved to the recycling center that year, so we were closed for about 5 months. So that $40,000 loss, net loss, represents only 7 months out of the year, not an entire 12 months. We did have one quick incident out here where people put too much cardboard over the weekend into the compactor, and it cost us an additional $1,000. And at the same time, we offered a $10 rebate for people to take their brush to a private vendor, and we would rebate them. In 2019, 32 people out of our population of about 34,000 took us up on that. And to date, through 2020, we've only had 6 people do that. So again, as you can see, revenue declining significantly all the way down to 2020. So I'll tell you why you can't see that line. Through March, we had generated $36 in revenue from recycling commodities. So if you project that out over the course of the year, if that trend had continued, which it would, and I'll show you why in the next slide, that would have only been $120. So in a matter of a few years, we went from $10,000 in revenue down to 120. And then obviously our expenses were just going up exponentially. So I wanted to kind of explain what happened and why in an effort for people to understand. And this just isn't a Windsor problem or a Colorado problem or a United States problem. This is actually a global problem in terms of recycling. Municipal recycling used to be for some municipalities, not Windsor, because we're like a transfer site where people bring their recyclables to us. We then have it hauled off to a true recycling center. But some municipalities across the nation actually, because recycling was profitable, made a lot of money. Windsor did not. January 1, 2018, China, which was the global market purchaser of almost all the recyclables in the world, stopped buying. Their government decided that they were no longer going to buy recyclables. So they're almost nearly out of the market. That caused a chain reaction across the country and across the globe in terms of the commodity price just going to the bottom. So basically, the number one reason is China stopped buying. The reason they stopped buying was contamination. So China used to look at shipment of recyclables and go, okay, there's about 5% of that recycled product in there that's contaminated. So for example, you have a jar of peanut butter and you finish it and you didn't wash it out. You just threw it in your recycle container. That's contaminated, and it then contaminates the rest of the recycling that's in the whole bin. Well, China got tired of all the countries in the world sending them contaminated product. And that's why they said, we're no longer going to buy. Excuse me. And then the other piece, and this really is a part of contamination, is the wishful recycling. We as citizens of Windsor and the town board and everybody across the country want to do the right thing. We want to recycle. We want to help impact our environment and the earth. But we ultimately aren't educated well enough, and we recycle the wrong things. So like, for example, you get your newspaper thrown at your on your driveway, and it comes in a sleeve of plastic. If you throw that sleeve of plastic in the recyclable container, you've just contaminated the recycling container. So unknowingly, we're recycling some products that shouldn't be recycled, and then we just contribute to that contamination. So those are the three big reasons why the market has basically crashed, and it started January 1, 2018, when China said, no more, we're not going to take it. So then what are those impacts? And so what you see on the left is really, I went and found some newspaper articles across the state, and this is kind of just a snippet of Colorado, but if you go out and look, there's hundreds of them. The impact of what China decided to do, which is not buy recyclables, impacted every community that was in the recycling business. So you kind of see a snippet of them over there on the left. Some are local, some are not. What did it do to Windsor? So that's on the right. So if you came out here today, and I'm looking out my office window, there's 4, 5, 6 recycling containers. Every time that bin is picked up and hauled off, it costs anywhere between $200 and $250 per bin every single time. That adds up. The slide that you saw a few slideshows ago, the graph, our annual costs over the last 3 years, the cost of hauling it off has gone. So this isn't labor costs or getting something fixed like the compactor. This is just hauling costs. Our hauling costs went up in the last 3 years by 107%. Also in March, we were informed, as we always are every year, of an additional 3.2% cost increase to our hauling for 2020. At the same time, as you saw on that chart, our revenues decreased by 99%. Quite frankly, to run a business and be down to having only $120 projected revenue over the course of a year is, it's really zero. And then kind of the message here is, even if we went from, and I'm sure people saw in the press release and the information we put out, that, and you'll see it on the next slide, that only about 4% of people 4% of residents were using the recycling. Even if we could double that to 8 or even maybe 12% of residents using it, if utilization costs, if the increase of utilizing our recycling center were to increase, so would the cost. So we see it, and every recycling sees it every Christmas. And obviously with COVID, the shopping that's occurring via Amazon, everything coming in a cardboard box. And we understand that. But if we take all that product, it's not like we take it and pay the same cost. Our cost to have it hauled off is only going to go up exponentially as that usage increases as well. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison. As the increase goes up, so will the price. So that kind of gets us to 2020. We're plugging along. We're still in the business. Middle of March, and all of a sudden, boom, the hammer of COVID-19 falls and hits Windsor and the rest of the country and in the world. The town was tasked, as the mayor alluded to earlier, to take some reductions due to the economic impact. Anytime you shut down an entire community and economy, it's gonna have a ripple effect. And we saw that $20 million in capital and operation reductions, and you can see the breakout. And those are the numbers that the mayor mentioned earlier. I can assure you that no no department in the board and leadership team took any of these reductions lightly at all. It was very serious. I can assure you that that was a long week for all of us. So how did I come to the recommendation to provide the board in terms of we should get out of this business? Really, quite frankly, it's data and some research and analysis, and you can see those on the screen. So we've been counting cars in terms of usage, resident only. For the past 8 months, we determined that about 4% of the users or 4% of the residents use this site. Quite frankly, that could be lower. And what I mean by that is we weren't counting repeat users. We were counting cars. Not did the same car from Miss Sally show up 4 times in a week. It was just we counted 4 cars. So quite frankly, it could be less than 4%. We also know that there are 4 local providers for recycling curbside, so you don't even have to drive here. And an example is Gallegos. They serve, and they've told us this, they serve about 40% of Windsor homes, and 90% of those homes do curbside recycling. So it's not like we're saying everybody stop recycling. The ability for residents to still recycle is out there just on the private sector. As I already showed you, the trend showed and continued a dramatic decline in revenue and increased cost. And then obviously we were also going to be impacted by an additional cost increasing of 3.2% in the hauling. And so the bottom line for me and why I made the recommendation, and then ultimately why I believe the board agreed, is the commodity market has been in a free fall, as we explained, since 2018. We're not saying don't recycle. Actually, we were encouraging everyone to continue to recycle. We recycle here in the town. If you looked underneath my desk here, there's a trash bin and a recycling bin, and that's everywhere. We have the same thing in our public works yard. We have them in our parks. So we're still recycling, but what we're saying is it makes sound business sense for us, the town, to not be in the service, to allow residents to contract that out through private companies. And that basically is kind of why we made the decision to recommend to the board, and ultimately they approved. And then kind of to that end, obviously people can use their local provider curbside, but there are 2 other locations that if they have excess or they have, I don't know, something, maybe they missed their recycling week, they could haul it to these 2 locations. They're somewhat local. I may be missing a few. So don't quote me on that those are the only 2, but those are the 2 that I'm very aware of. So that's kind of in a roundabout way, a look back at where we were, what's occurred over the past 3 years, and ultimately what the impact of COVID did and why. And I think it goes back to what the mayor said, $20 million. This is just one reduction in that overall scope, in terms of the business of the town. So with that, I will unshare my screen and be happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Do we have a couple questions?
We do, Mayor. Let me start with our first question submitted earlier today. When will the town offer yard waste collection?
Mr. Lucas?
So I can take
Go
that.
ahead. All right.
We canceled the one for the spring because it was in the middle of COVID. So we were able to save some dollars there, but we are intending to have a recycling brush and recycling event this fall. I would expect it to be quite large given people have been home, and I'm sure they've been collecting a lot of those materials. I would assume that that's going to take place late September, early October. We try to time it around leaf season at the yard cleanup. And then I will tell you that I fully expect to recommend in next year's budget that we have a spring and a fall cleanup, knowing that service is needed in the community. So one this year, 2 subsequently moving forward.
Thanks, Mr. Lucas. I know that the brush recycling program, those cleanup days have been extremely popular. And I know that I've had personally people reach out to me leading up to the last one we had, and they were extremely excited to have that service provided on a community-wide basis. So I look forward to those in the future. Do we have any other questions?
We sure do, Mayor. Crystal Real, one of our attendees right now, submitted a question. Have you considered adding a mandatory recycling fee as part of Windsor water bills, perhaps $1 a month? And Crystal, I have you unmuted and allowed to talk. Mayor, if you want to maybe...
Hi, Crystal. I'll welcome you to the call if you'd like to add anything more to that question that was pre-submitted.
Personally, I don't really, I wasn't aware that there was even a recycling area anyway. So, just adding that mandatory fee maybe would help cut down on the budget shortfall and potentially, bring in more awareness of the recycling center. It would have been, had I known about it, it would have been really good. I would have used it quite a bit.
I wanted to ask you if a fee like that was imposed on every water bill, sewer bill, people within our billing mechanism, do we have any idea what that would bring in? Or is that a question that we could answer? Or do we know how much that that fee would bring in if we were to implement that?
I would have to tell you that I've not done that research, so I wouldn't really. I'd be issuing a really big swag there, so I don't know that I could answer that accurately by giving you a dollar amount, and would that, make us break even or that kind of thing. I'd need to spend some time on that.
Okay.
So, Mayor, if I could,
A couple thoughts to that question. The first is that even if people saw it on the bill, we may get some more utilization, but we still know right now we have about 96% of our residents who aren't using it. So to really be asking the vast majority of people to pay for a service that they're not currently using. And I think for a service that a majority of them are paying for already. Secondly, we don't have a refuge and the town isn't in, it doesn't provide a trash service. So I don't really see a clear connection between the water and that. And then third, I would just point out that we have, the town is one water provider out of 3 in Windsor. We also have Fort Collins, Loveland, so all of our Lumber County folks, we couldn't add to that. We also have the North Weld District. I think it would be a hard solution to go through something like that.
A hard way to implement.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then I would ask Jess, do you know how many just for bills we send out per month? How many homes we bill?
There's approximately 11,000 utility bills sent out between a water, sewer, storm charge, water, sewers, whatever we do for their utilities. So you could do some light math on that for sure and have an idea.
Okay, but like Mr. Hill said, not everybody that could be taking advantage of the center being there would actually be even getting a bill via that mechanism, because there's people that don't even get a bill, is what you're saying, that are within Windsor that are.
That's right. For water, I think everybody between probably if you have storm drain or sewer, you may get a bill, but I'd also point out that we know that these costs are tied to 4% of utilization. So I think we would be chasing our tails a little bit, just because if we added to the bills and we drove in more people to come in and start using it, I think we're going to get in a pretty big spiral where it's still not going to cover. And we're going to still have a lot of people that are already paying for curbside recycling that don't use it at all. Anyway, I think it would be a good policy discussion for the board if you wanted to explore it. But I see a few pitfalls with that.
Okay. Crystal, did that provide an answer? I know you remuted yourself there. Did you have any follow-up to any of these comments?
No, I didn't. All valid points and, something I didn't think about, but yeah, that answered them.
Okay. Thank you for your question.
We have 2 more, Mayor. They're both from Christine Austin on the Q&A section. And the first one is, what about a fee for recycling users at the point of recycling?
Mr. Lucas, did you have a thought about that, or maybe Mr. Hill?
I would say very similar to what Shane said. the increase of use, if we could get people to use it more, would just drive our costs up. So it doesn't make a lot of business sense. That said, did some rough math today, just in anticipation, because I paid attention to social media and seen people making comments similar to that in terms of could we charge a fee. My rough math, we would be charging excuse me, at a minimum somewhere between $10 and $15 per time. And what we wouldn't know is, say that just those same 4%, would everyone pay that the same amount every single time, knowing that you can do recycling? So for example, I think I pay personally in Windsor $10 a month so that's 2 pickups for $10, as opposed to if I came here only twice a month, I would probably be paying upwards of $20 or $30. So I don't know. And again, that's rough math. I don't know that makes a lot of sense for the consumer. And even if it did, it would drive our costs as well, much to what Mr. Hale was saying earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Christine has one more question. Also, many people are busy and don't have time to continually check the Town of Windsor site for upcoming meeting agendas. Is this something that the town is willing to post on its social media channels to build awareness of upcoming meetings so we have a say in topics that arise? And if I may, I can answer that for you.
Okay.
Christine, we do have an option on our website called Notify Me, where you can subscribe to many things, including getting notifications when agendas for town board meetings, advisory board meetings are happening. They do come through text and email, and I would encourage that you do sign up on that if you would like.
Well, and Jess, I would ask, could you just pull up that link and put it in the Q&A?
I will, yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
And then we do our postings through social media, letting people know that we have a town board going live on YouTube, and you can always watch through our YouTube channel or view channel 8 on our virtual meetings section.
Okay, is there any other questions or anybody that's joined us on via Zoom that had a question for us?
Judith, I see that you are attending. Do you have any comment or question? If you could unmute yourself, and we'll give you 3 minutes.
I was going to ask,
Judith, you unmuted there you go. Try again.
okay, I was going to ask about a fee too, and I can't see how people would pay $10 or $15, but I can see how people would pay maybe $1 or $2 or $3. I think in Loveland it's $3, and I can see people paying that. I do use curbside, but I also use the recycling center, and the 4% of people does not seem possible to me. There's always people there using it when I'm there.
Okay, Judith, I appreciate your comment. I don't know how to follow up with that other than to say I personally am not out there, but I know that our public services director who gave his presentation today does keep track of how many people have used that service out there. And like we said, in all of 2019, the commodities that were received out there were only able to be there was only $120, not $120,000, $120 worth of value to receive back to the town for that. So it is a service that we're providing that doesn't even come close to breaking even with what we inevitably, get from turning those commodities in for a cash payment to the town. Did you have a follow-up comment or questions, Judith?
When paid, a couple dollars.
Mr. Lucas, do you have a response to that as to how many people, how much that would bring into the town, even if that type of fee was imposed at the time of deposit of commodities?
A few dollars would probably correlate to $15,000 or $20,000 in revenue, and that's if all 4% continued to use the service to pay. You know, and that we wouldn't be able to know that the same 4% would pay. And again, if it increased, our costs would go up.
Okay.
Well, to use that, I think,
Quicker math, so if we believe it would be $10 to $15 per person is what we would need to charge to break even. Let's use the low number at $10. If people paid $3, then the town would still be subsidizing 70%, and they'd be paying 30%. I mean, that's really quick math, kind of being on the spot. But yeah, that's how I believe it would work out there.
And Judith, I would just throw this out there to you. I know for my own personal trash/recycling service that a lot of the existing, at least I can only speak to Ram Waste that does my specific neighborhood, they had a fee for the initial deposit for the recycling bucket that I have, but I don't have any line item with my trash provider for the recycling portion. And they do have a truck every week that comes through to collect trash, and then a second truck that comes through to collect the recycling, but it is not a specific line item for recycling. Therefore, it was always told to me that our trash service was free. That all being said, I know that not every trash provider, does not charge a specific special fee for that service. So I think it would be up to which trash provider that you go with. Some of them do offer that at a competitive price for that service, and some it's already included with what you pay for trash, regular weekly trash service.
Well, I do use that. I do use curbside.
But I also like to use the recycling center. I don't mind paying for it, yeah.
Okay.
Judith, I appreciate your comments there. I don't know how to go about saying that other than your voice has been heard, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Mayor, we have one more question.
Okay.
It is from Shannon Player Timmons, and she is online. Her question is through the chat, and it says, shouldn't the government provide some services at a loss? For example, paving streets doesn't make money.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think that the governments do provide a lot of services at a loss, and that's certainly something that the town does. She's right, when we pave streets, it doesn't make money, sidewalks don't make money, parks don't provide money, outdoor pools certainly don't break even. So I think that's kind of the policy question for the board. And really the priority is we went through and cut $20 million out of the budget. What could we still do, and what needed to be sacrificed? I think based on Mr. Lucas's presentation, you saw that given the 4% utilization, as opposed to streets that everybody drives on and sidewalks, etc., it was a cut that was recommended based on low utilization. But I'd also say that as a part of those big capital cuts that we put in, there were paving projects that went away. There were sidewalk projects, multimodal things that went away. So it's not like the entire cuts fell on recycling. I think that they fell across the board to all these things. And in long term, it'll remain a policy question for the board of, okay, here's the tax dollars we have available. How do we get the biggest win for the residents? How do we address the most people? And I think right now recycling, because it's such a big loser in the commodity market, it's really a heavy lift to subsidize it so heavily. So I don't know if Shannon has any additional comments or questions.
Ms. Timmons, do you have comment?
Yes.
Wondering if the costs to the town could be reduced by limiting what was available to be recycled, because I know some of the local pickup places that people do curbside recycling does not take glass, which is something that does not biodegrade over time. So is it possible to just offer a service of recycling glass and maybe cardboard, since we're all, using a ton of cardboard with online shopping?
Mr. Lucas, did you have a comment that you could provide there?
The largest costs are the cardboard and paper recycling. That is what used to be the number one recyclable, and now it is the least in terms of a commodity. Glass still has some value, but I can, like, for example, if I was showing you the charts of how frequently those bins are picked up to be hauled off, it is the cardboard and the paper that was the main driver of the hauling cost. It's not the glass bin.
Mr. Hale, did you?
So maybe just ask if that's what people can't get curbside?
In terms of the glass, just recycle glass.
Yeah,
I don't know that it would make sense for us to just be in that one sliver of the market.
it just seems like in terms of the environmental impact, because eventually cardboard will break down. A lot of things will break down. Glass will not break down. Plastic doesn't, but I understand China's not taking that anymore.
Yeah, and they're not taking any of it, even the glass
Right.
product. I think it goes to the global. Unfortunately, because as I said in the presentation, we all care about the environment and want to do what's best, but at the same time, when that service is available in the private sector, sometimes the government should get out of that business, and that was part of the decision.
Ms. Tibbins, did you have another question, or did that answer your question?
It sort of answered my question. I know there's people that can't recycle glass with their curb pickup, so it's not a service provided to all locals. But
Well, and Ms. Timmons, I'm sorry, this is
I
Shane.
want to say that I know that at least some of the curbside haulers do take glass, because mine does. So it is available privately. If a specific provider doesn't provide that, our consumers do have that business option to say, I'm going to switch providers to take my glass. So it is provided on the private side.
Ms. Rael, I see that you have asked another question here on the chat about brush cleanup. Is that similar to what Greeley used to do? Mr. Lucas, could you answer that for her best, based upon our brush recycling program we used to have?
I'm not sure exactly what Greeley used to do. What we used to do when it was at Diamond Valley was we would accept yard waste. So, for example, grass clippings, trimmed your trees, bushes, shrubs, that kind of thing. And I'm going to off the cuff this because it's been several years since we had that discussion, but I want to say in 2017, 18-ish, while we were in that business, the cost just to have Hagerman come in and grind up the pile once a year was about $60,000. As we headed into 19. Go ahead.
Hey, Eric, it was more than that. I think our latest bid was north of $80,000.
Yeah, that's as we headed into 19 before we got out of the business, it was $90,000. It had jumped significantly, and that was kind of the driver of getting out of that. So, for example, that if you went out to Diamond Valley, that pile is still there from 2018. And
I'm sorry, Eric, I believe Ms. Ryle's question is more in line of what is our current cleanup? I mean, when we have our cleanup days, what services do we provide? She has the second one. Can you get rid of big items or items that are hard to recycle? So if you could describe more like what we did in our last spring cleanup, I think that's more to her question.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood, and I'm not watching the chat. I'm just listening. So what we currently take is branches, shrubs, yard waste, basically, especially in the fall, leaves, those kind of things. So we were able to chip those on site. So we take that. In terms of big things, we take grills, bed frames, those kind of things. We don't take mattresses. And then the communications team will publish that well in advance as we head into late September and October to give the exact list of what we take. Things that we don't take is like paint, Freon, those kind of things. So we'll take an old stove or a microwave, refrigerator, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so if I can add, so
different for the town, but what our intent is to do is every spring to have a more traditional cleanup day, where we take a lot of those items that are hard to recycle, like Mr. Lucas said, you know, whether it's an old grill or you know, just kind of some big bulky items. So we provide that in the spring, as well as the normal brush recycling items. And then we have the second cleanup day in the fall, where it's specifically just brush. So this year, I think our fall cleanup will have be more of a cleanup day, just because we're gonna only be able to have one. And then next year, if the budget allows and the board, you know, still supports the project, our intent would be to get back to 2 cleanups per year. So I hope that answers your question now.
Mr. Mayor, we have one more question from Christine Austin.
Okay.
As commodity prices are cyclical, would rising commodity prices offset any of these costs? How much do the commodity prices factor in? Is it a significant percentage?
Mr.
Lucas, you can probably speak best to that with commodity prices, et cetera.
Yeah, I would say that that probably wouldn't have factored if they were fluctuating in small numbers, but literally has gone from where it was at in 2017 to 0. If you missed the slideshow, we had projected $120 in revenue from commodities in 2020. We had seen a 99% decline. I think it really is a big driver in the decision in terms of what we can generate back, but knowing that the board had a decision there of what type of loss are they willing to accept. And we were accepting, as we headed into 2020, to still absorb a significant cost, a loss. But then obviously COVID hit, and that decision became more apparent that we probably needed to be out of the business.
Right, and Eric, if I could, I think I would just add.
Really, to answer the question though, if the commodity market really did change, and again, if you miss the PowerPoint, so much of this is driven by China and you know, kind of their policy decisions as far as what they'll accept for recyclables and the very high standards they have now. So if they were to change, or the recycling market changed quite dramatically, and there was a lot higher return on our recyclables, I think certainly if there was a business case to be made, and we could prove to the board and really show the community that we could do this, either not at a loss or at a much less subsidy, at a much less loss, I think the town would certainly consider it at that time. It's just that the commodity market is so bad now, it's just, you know, anyway. So yeah, I think that if things are different in a couple of years, and we have a different business case to bring back to the board, certainly I think we'd take a look at it at that time.
Well, hopefully that answered Ms. Rails and Ms. Austin's question. Jess, do we have anybody else that has the question? Okay. Are there any of our other panelists and staff that are on the call that had a question or comment or anything else to add? Ms. Humphries, do you see anybody?
I'm looking, sir.
Okay.
And Your Honor, if I could, and Ms. Humphries, Mr. Lucas, could you put like that PowerPoint either on the website, or could we link it somehow? I see note that somebody mentioned that they missed a PowerPoint. So I think it'd be good for the community to make that very publicly visible, so they could look through your slides as well.
And I will add to that, for those attendees that registered, I do have their email, and I will definitely email it to them in addition to what we get posted.
Thank you, Ms. Humphries.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas, for helping us out with that. And thank you to all of our staff and attendees on the meeting today, and for those that phoned in and joined us via Zoom. We appreciate your concern over this project. These choices to make some of these cuts to our budget this year did not come lightly. I can speak on behalf of the entire board and the town. We wish that we were able to provide some of these services to our community, and it's unfortunately one of those tough decisions that the board had to make regarding this program. So we appreciate your comments and questions, and feel free, as always, to email the town or the board if there are any other questions regarding this that come up after this meeting. So With that, we will conclude this meeting. We again appreciate everybody tuning in and joining us today, and we wish you a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much.